This is an overview of my quest to learn Morse code. When I got my license back in November of 2016, I was really excited, but I wanted to do more. So I decided to go for my general about 3 months later. One day when I was working a contest, I ended up broadcasting on the wrong frequency in 20 meters. I didn't realize until after the fact that I had finished a contact in a frequency that I was not licensed for. Fortunately, though, nothing bad happened as a result. But I realized that since I'm, let's just say, susceptible to not always paying attention to those little details, I thought it might be wise to go ahead and try to get my extra, because it would be one less thing I would have to worry about. My radio automatically blocks unlicensed frequencies for the United States, so this would help me idiot-proof the process. A little added insurance policy, you might say. So at that point, my goal turned towards getting my extra. Now the extra test was much, much harder. A lot of the questions were things I had no comprehension of. And so even with doing a lot of memorization, it was still difficult because it was terms I had no frame of reference for. However, I did manage to pass it and was excited for my accomplishment. Yet somehow, I walked away feeling empty inside. It was like, where do I go from here? Thus, I began a new adventure to learn CW. I began on this website, lcwo.net, Learn CW Online, to learn Morse code online. This is really quite a good site, yet I struggled. I went through the introduction that explained how the website works, and it gives you an example. I started going through the lessons, which started with K, M, U, R, E, etc. And as I was going through the lessons, I got to about lesson 15 when I realized all the letters were becoming a blur. I wasn't really able to associate them with anything. So I quit. I got frustrated as I wasn't getting anywhere. I could not really get past this point. I started doing some research and I found some interesting sites for learning Morse code. I found ones like this that were kind of cool because you could start visualizing what you were trying to learn. I found some charts like this where you could see the dits on one side and the das on the other. You could measure out the dits going left and the das going right, but this did not do a thing to help me remember what I needed to learn. Nothing was working. I even found sites like this which spell it out, so to speak. Again, none of this really helped. I even found sites like this one to learn CW in 1 hour or even 10 minutes. And it would come up with the scenario like this. To help remember A as axe and E and face and all these words. And then they would have you remember a sentence like, an axe smashed a large letter E. And I was like, how am I really ever going to remember this? This doesn't work for me. Now, this may work for someone else, but it was not working for me. All of these things, none of them helped me in any way whatsoever to remember Morse code. For example, even the Morse code song did not help me.
Soon you'll know the rhythm of the code. A dit is a dot, a da is a dash. The rhythm of the code. Alpha. Da. Bravo. Da, 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 da. Charlie. Da, 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 da.
None of these things were helping, and I was very frustrated. So I decided to try to come up with a way that my mind could visually recall Morse code, like a chart I could have in my head that I could use as reference so that I didn't always have to refer back to a piece of paper. As I kept practicing it, it helped my brain memorize that chart. This way I could do it in my head as opposed to forever looking at a piece of paper. I could be driving down the road and practice. Now in the end, this did only get me so far, but at least it was a good starting point. If you go to my GitHub site, you will find a Morse code chart that I have created along with the downloadable numbers spreadsheet that you can edit. It's also available in PDF or JPEG, whatever works for you. So let's take a look at that. Numbers I did on my chart a little different than anything else. Numbers are really pretty easy to remember. So I do the dots and dashes in the order in which they come. 1 through 5, 6 through 0. However, everything else I try to put in a format that would help me remember the chart based on familiar things. For example, I always know a sentence ends with a period. Therefore, the right column of each chart is periods or dots. So if you can't remember which side of the chart started with dots and which side started with dashes, just remember the periods are on the right-hand side, just like at the end of a sentence. With exception to numbers, each of these tables have the dots start on the right-hand column. So that's how you can remember which column starts with dots and transversely, which column starts with dashes. So then I started to try to think of a way to help me link different groups of abbreviations, again, with whatever common reference I could use. These are some examples. TMO, too many options, take me out, 10 miles out, tomorrow. Whatever would be the most meaningful to you as a memory aid. This is just an example of different ways that you might be able to associate the letters TMO. So if you start practicing with the first box on the left-hand side, you can see T is 1 dash, M is 2, O is 3. If you can just remember TMO, too many options, or take me out in that order, 1, 2, 3, or dash, 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 or again, da, 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 da. With this formula, I was able to remember with TMO the order and how many dashes for each letter. Now, EISH, that's the right-hand column. And the right-hand column, the end of a sentence, what does it end with? Dots or periods. So the right-hand column is going to start with dots. And I went with the same idea. Now, I couldn't really find an abbreviation or acronym that really worked with EISH. However, there's apparently an African word that is pronounced ish. It's slang for an expression of excitement or surprise, or even disapproval or annoyance. But if you can associate it with an exclamation of excitement, like, wow, that's amazing, or ish, that's amazing. Now, remember how to spell it, EISH. Now you can speak South African, and you have memorized 4 more letters. E is 1 dit, or period. I is 2. S is 3. H is 4. Now you can put them together in a sentence. Too many options, ish. Now you have literally learned those 7 letters in Morse code. Now that you've learned those 7 letters, you can practice these 7 letters without having to use the chart. You should be able to apply this to your memory pretty quickly. As you're driving down the road and you see a road sign that says exit, think to yourself, recall the letters that you know. E, dit. There is no X because we haven't learned it yet. I, dit. T, da. So that's what I did anytime I was driving down the road. Each time I saw a sign, I would take the letter I had learned and practice them by translating them into the dits and das. It helped me to be able to associate the letters with their corresponding codes without having to look at a piece of paper. This maybe was not the best time for me to utilize this method of free association to help me commit things to memory. However, you personally can employ this method perhaps when you read an article, scan a news headline, watching TV, or just about anything. This might prove helpful to you. I know it was a very good method for me. Once I had felt I had this down, I moved on to the next group. The next group starts with only 1 dash or 1 dot. The process plays out the same way. NDB. For me, I work with databases, and in that field, you have one that's called a NoSQL database, or NDB. If you're in aviation, you could use non-directional beacon. Any acronym that you can come up with that will help you associate the order NDB will work. Then, all you have to remember is 1, 2, 3. You know the second set on the left-hand side starts with a dash. Likewise, the right-hand side starts with a dot, and then the dashes 1, 2, 3. For example, on the right side, you have AWJ. Perhaps you could use all wheels junkie, abrasive water jet, authority with jurisdiction, association of women journalists. Whatever will help you remember NDB and AWJ will help you to remember this chart. All you have to do is remember that they both are in the second set and start each 1 dash or 1 dot, and that each letter adds the opposite in dots or dashes. As you move along through the chart, you will see again, this is 2 dashes. and there are 2 dots. So just take little bits at a time to memorize whenever and wherever you can until you get them committed to memory. With these short, nice little samples that I could focus on, I became more adept at memorizing them faster. I didn't have to look at a page or a book, and I was able to commit them to memory. Now, let's move to the next set. For me, being a software developer, there is a compression called gzip. So I used gzip to help me remember. But you could use Ground Zero, Generation Z, Goodyear Zeppelin, whatever works for your brain to associate it. In any case, the third set, consistently 2 dashes, then 2 dots, followed in the order of the letters that come. Again, the right side, UV, ultraviolet, just about anyone can associate that. Or unmanned vehicle, utility vault, University of Vermont. Again, those are just some ideas. Whatever works for you to associate it with UV. You have now learned the third set. Now, there is a slight variation with this set because we're running out of letters that work with patterns that can match. So I did have to tweak this to a degree, and it gets more complex as you go. But for the most part, you can see the patterns and you can see how it follows through. V on this set does kind of break the rule a bit, but it was the closest one I could find to fit in this group. Now, when we move to the next group, I call this the complex group. The other one was the simple group, as it's going to be much easier to remember. With the complex group, you will notice the patterns here. So again, it starts with a dash, but instead of 2 dashes, it's a dash dot dash. And on the right side, it's dot dash dot. Again, the dot leading side, dots or periods, are at the end of the sentence. So you can always remember the dot side of the chart is on the right-hand side. I'm not going to continue going with the details here, but you get the idea. We have different ways you could possibly remember this next one. KCY, Kansas City Youth, Knoxville Christian Youth. I was just picking random things. Everyone will likely have different things to associate these with. It doesn't matter what it is, whatever works for you, it will help you remember. Because this is the complex group, it was harder and harder for me to find patterns that were similar. But you get the idea. For example, right and left, with a dot or a period in between. So it's not quite as easy to remember, but the pattern follows through. I tried to keep them similar so it'd be a little easier to remember this chart and visualize it in your head. I will admit, it gets harder as you go, but there was no way around that. Group B is the same idea. Starts with 1 dash, but the next level is 2 dots. Or 1 dot and 2 dashes on the right-hand side. As you can see as we go through these, some of these no longer quite match. But these were the best I could come up with that helped me remember and worked with my thought pattern. You are welcome to download these files and edit them any way you need to help you remember Morse code. This is just a starting point. So as you can see, as we go through here, I was running out of options. For example, x/, I didn't know what to associate that with. So I just said, okay, like algebra, x divided by 2. I just pictured that formula in my head and just that was the order, x/. Or, for example, P and the @ sign, I just associated with the word pat to help me remember those 2 symbols for the right-hand side. Again, it is more complex, and you will have to try to associate it in some way in your mind that will help you remember it. By the time I got to Group C, I was really running out of options, but all you have are 2 symbols and the letters Q and F. So hopefully at this point, you've got the rest memorized, and these last 4 won't be too bad. Again, back to numbers. Like I said, I reversed them. I kept them in the order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. They're pretty straightforward. Regarding punctuations, I tried to find similarities between these. Punctuations are quite a bit harder and more advanced and not necessarily required for you to communicate with Morse code. I did put some of the punctuations that were already covered on the other charts on this section, just to keep them grouped together. However, we have covered enough of the punctuation in the previous charts that you would be able to provide someone with an email address or something like that. With this whole chart in mind, I used some of the following techniques. I employed chunking, I employed a mnemonic device, I employed graphical organization so that you can visually see this chart as you're working through it. And I've also kept everything in a fairly rhythmic pattern. I tried to keep things in groups that complemented each other. Again, this is what worked for me. After about a week of using this technique, I was able to do 5 words a minute. Unfortunately, this is as far as I got. And then I got frustrated again because I couldn't get past it. This was a great foundation, but still not enough. I connected my key to my radio. I went on and I tried to make some contacts, and people heard me. And I could tell they were responding to my call, but that's about as much as I could make out. In real life, it was very, very hard. Even though I was finding myself successful when using the Learn CW online site. Even though I was able to key out every letter and hear every letter at 5 words per minute, once I was in a real life situation, it just was not working. So now I went ahead and registered at cwops.org, which is the CW Academy. It is a free site with volunteers to help you learn CW. One of the things that I was struggling with is I had no place to really learn without feeling intimidated. I didn't really want to continue to try to struggle and decipher code and frustrate the contact on the other end because I could not figure out what they were trying to send. It was embarrassing. So I signed up for CW Ops, and what they offer is training similar to the Learn CW online site. And my first impression, I didn't feel like it was going to be beneficial to me as far as the website was concerned. However, you will have the opportunity to practice Morse code in real time via Skype with others that are learning too. By using Skype and the microphone on your computer, you can practice it with the other people that are in the class. This will cut out the intimidation factor, at least for me, since I will be able to practice with others that are in the same skill level. So it's a lot easier to practice it without feeling like you're wasting other people's time. I'm really looking forward to getting deeper into the class. We did our first setup session this last Thursday, at which point we made sure everyone could hear their radios through Skype and made sure everyone's keys were working and covered some general introductions. Obviously, it remains to be seen how much this will help, but I have high expectations since this is an excellent avenue to put into practice what I've learned so far. As my journey continues, I will update you on my progress. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope it proves beneficial to you, hopefully giving you some guidance in determining what direction to take if you too are struggling and trying to learn Morse code.
Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, Hotel, India, Juliet,